What?
Okay.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear
Okay,
you.
but it says join audio, but it doesn't say join video. Oh, wait a minute. There we go, start video. No, the host has stopped my video.
That's right. None of us can be seen.
Okay, that's all right.
There we go.
Other people's video,
Ah,
Wait a minute. Somebody had a haircut. Carter?
can people turn on their video or is that not?
No, I don't think I'm not able to.
Let's see.
I see you.
Carter? Carter?
Yes, David?
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
I'm looking to change the setting.
Yep.
Anyway, we could do it without video. Yeah.
Let's take a look here.
Well, I spent a lot of time arranging the furniture, so I hope we can get the video camera working.
And I know, David, you dressed up for us, so
I put a shirt on and everything.
Would it make sense for us to all sign out and wait a couple of minutes and see if that helps and then sign back in?
okay, here we go. I think I got it set there. So everybody should be able to start their video now.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. I don't know if that's set as default or not, but I'll go back and make sure that that's adjusted.
Oh, Dan, that's such an improvement.
Isn't it?
Wow.
I mean, I recognize that apartment.
Yes, you do. Rich Cacapola lent it to me.
Can you show us your certificates?
All right. So, Amy and Valerie, how are we?
We have quorum.
We do. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, but I don't see
Amy's not on. Amy's not on. She was having trouble signing in. I was on the phone with her. She was having trouble with the link for some reason.
Okay.
So I have us covered if unless you
Okay.
want 15 minutes.
All right, well, we can, let's see. Bob, are you on with us?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, there you are. All right. Okay. Yeah, so the reason that you guys saw in your invitations the last names first is that it's easier to keep track of who's on by last name. And that, I didn't talk to Valerie about that yet, or to Amy, but that's why you guys are all set up with your last names, is it
Oh, there it is.
improves their ability to keep track of who's on and tracking votes, since I think everything's alphabetized by last name on the lists. So we're going to basically do the same agenda that we've been doing, which is having start with the district manager, then the chair, and then any old business and new business. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as such?
So moved?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. So Bob, do you want to
Sure.
start off?
Okay. First, and I think many of you or all of you may have heard this already, the mayor announced it during his press conference this morning. He's canceled all street events through the end of June. The big ones in our district are the Pride Parade and some of the Pride events related to that. It just canceled in June. I think postponed might be a more accurate description, because he's going to be talking to them about rescheduling the events for later in the year. Secondly, we got an email this afternoon from NYU that the construction at 181 Mercer, and actually all the NYU construction projects, but the big one is on Mercer Street, are going to start up again. Apparently the New York State has revised the definition of essential construction to include public and private schools. So workers will be returning or have returned to the Mercer Street site today, some workers, to kind of test the equipment and just get the remobilization going again. And I think next week we'll see all the NYU construction of it. The only ones I'm really familiar with are Mercer Street and the cogen plant a block or two away. Thirdly, the borough president, Gail Brewer, had mentioned during her report at the Borough Service Cabinet meeting on Friday, she asked all the DMs to remind the board members to make sure you've completed the census. So if anyone hasn't done that, please do so. I think she might be following up with the boards to see kind of what our batting average is. And lastly, again, Borough President, on this Wednesday at 3 o'clock, she'll be hosting a virtual town hall on the Summer Youth Employment Program. And we're going to post it on the website, and we'll send out the reminders about that with information on how to register. And that's it. That's my report.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob. So this morning we had the borough board meeting, which I think all of the community boards are some way, shape, or form somewhat similar to us. Everybody started doing Zoom meetings. I think one board is using WebEx, but only because they had started using that, and it was a little too complicated for them to shift gears. I think a number of people have had, number of the boards, the same challenges that we've had and the same success that we've had. So it was interesting getting together virtually with everybody and hearing from them. There was pretty significant attendance from the elected officials, which is unusual for borough board, but I think that we had most of or a good fair number of the city council members providing updates. One of the things that was really becoming apparent, sort of the food insecurity that's really starting to creep in and becoming noticeable across the city, even including in our board, just sort of the number of meals that are being served at the various schools and the demand at the food pantries. And I think it's something that we might want to find out a little bit more about it and keep a little bit better track to understand that a little bit more about that. I think that's a very telling and a very sad sign of, as far as what's going on right now. And it's unclear, at least to me, if that's going to be corrected as more and more unemployment, monies are sorted out, or if this is going to be a long-term situation. So that was something that really resonated with me, and in particular, as that relates to seniors and and other issues as far as how those issues all tie into each other. Just looking over my notes here. On another note, I've appointed a new public member to the Education Committee, which is Akila Azque. I may be pronouncing that wrong.
Azque.
Okay. Azque. I'm gonna try and get that pronunciation down. So that's exciting. She's been working in education-related issues for a long time in our board, so it'd be a really good addition. As a public member, as far as for us, I was looking at our calendar and realizing that we basically are going to be having 4 or 5 straight weeks of committee meetings. The way the calendar is set up, we're completing this month. Bob and I were just chatting about it before we started this, and I think it's the only way we can really transition back to our regular schedule is by having this sort of accelerated schedule through the last 2 weeks of this month and the first 2 weeks of next month. Just seems like what we need to do if we want to get back into the regular cycle of meetings. And on that note, sort of where we so this week we have tomorrow we have the SLA committee on, and we also have the SBA presentation. On Wednesday, we have the landmarks committee. On Thursday, we have the education committee. On Monday, traffic and transportation. Next Tuesday, the executive committee meeting, and then full board on Thursday. And then the following week is the temporary schedule. I'm just pulling it up on my computer here. So that would start off on the 5th with SLA licensing, Parks and Arts and Institution on the 6th, Traffic and Transportation on the 7th, Schools and Education on the 12th, Land Use on the 13th, Landmarks on the 14th, and Small Business and Economic Development on the 18th. The 12th, the reason we moved to Schools and Education there is because they're having a joint meeting with other community boards, and I guess that's the date that worked. So I don't know if that's a problem for you, Janet.
Well, we don't have anything
right.
May 18th right now. No.
Yeah, and it seems that we're sort of having some success with having some people come in and talk when they're available, right? Which
yeah, well, we do. I'm just sending you the note. We do have the presentation from the specialist for the U.S. Small Business Services. Sorry, this coming Wednesday at 1.
I thought that was tomorrow. It's Wednesday at 1. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just all over the place. Okay.
Janet, I have it for tomorrow. It's on.
All right, then no, I'm sorry. You guys are, I'm all over the place.
Okay.
Yes, it's tomorrow. I'm sorry, it's tomorrow at 1.
Okay, great. And it's unfortunate there's no Q&A in that, but I think it's good because everybody seems to indicate that program's gonna be getting some additional funding, right? So that's
right. But when you sign up for it, it
right.
does ask you to submit questions, so you can
okay.
submit them ahead of time.
Oh, it didn't. I don't think it did the first time when I had signed up, but okay.
I just got that when I signed up today.
Okay, that's good. So that's that should be. Did she give any indication of the number of people who had registered for it, or did any?
No, I didn't ask.
Okay. So that it leads to a pretty heavy schedule, but I think that's what we need to do to kind of catch up with the committees that haven't met and just make sure that we're moving through the other issues. It doesn't look that like the agendas are as heavy as usual. So it's a lot of, presumably faster meetings, but I'm speaking before we've had any committee meetings. So that remains to be seen as far as if this process of doing them virtually slows them down a bit. And the idea is to hopefully to have the public submit any detailed written questions beforehand, but allow them to publicly comment during the meetings. But any detailed information, it's helpful to have that before the meeting starts so the committee members can review it. Because I think this format's a little bit more difficult. You can't hand out anything to anybody. And so if somebody has something detailed to say, it's better to write it out and submit it and then just follow up with some quick comments. I leave it up to all the committee chairs on, as far as how you want to conduct the public sessions for each of the committees. Does everybody think that that's a good idea, or does anybody have any thoughts on?
How do we let the public know that they can submit?
We've been emailing it out with our emails, and it's listed right on the calendar with each committee to submit by 5 p.m. the day before to the info@cb2manhattan.org. And then, presumably things may come in after that, but the idea is just that it can be distributed to board members so they have a chance to take a look at any of the detailed, if people have anything detailed to submit.
I was at a CB5 Transportation Committee meeting, and they distributed through the chat. They distributed a Google Doc so that every the audience members could sign on to the Google Doc, and then the person running the meeting just ran through it and let everybody speak. Okay. I don't know, if we could. I thought it was very effective.
Yeah. We can do that. I've been a little bit hesitant because that's where you don't have any control over what people are writing on there. And that's just, so there's sort of that catch-22. Most of what we have is people have to be, signed in order to comment. But I think you're right that that's the way to do it because it makes it a little bit more clear. But raising your hand function is also, seems to work pretty well also, but it's something that we obviously need to, I think it'll become clear this week, right? When we do the first two meetings, what works, and if any want to do that, I'm fine with that. It's one more thing to switch on your screens for anybody who's chairing the meeting to keep track of what's going on. So I just leave it at that. It's if you're comfortable switching the screens and keeping track of what's on the Google Doc and what's and what you've got, with the Zoom and the people in front of you, that's fine. I just, that can be a little tricky for some people. I'm not saying everybody. I see Robin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, I don't know if anybody else was, first of all, I don't know if anybody else was at Borough Board today. It was my first experience. I just want to say we were very well represented by Carter Booth. He's our fearless leader. He was amazing. But I just wanted to go back to, you were talking about the food issue that if I'm going to paraphrase, but Gail made it sound like it was generally kind of a shit show. And I know I bring up my mom every week in this, but she falls into this weird niche where she's not, she's not impoverished and she's not unable to move, but she's become very understandably frightened about going into supermarkets. The one that's closest to her is this Morton Williams, where they're very narrow aisles. So, the only way that she's able at this point to get, I bike up to her now and bring her food. And actually, I think next week I'm going to go shopping for her. And it just seems like, I can't believe I'm the only one that's doing this. And it seems like there's got to be some sort of way to get people who are who are vulnerable but afraid to go shopping, like square meals. Like she's not much of a cook. She just wants those things that people who are at NYCHA and Department for the Aging and Meals on Wheels get, but she can afford it. That's the thing where we're in this weird spot where she doesn't want to not pay, but she needs people to bring her food because she's too afraid to go into a store. So if anybody has thoughts about that, it sounded like today Gail was actually on her own going out and volunteering to bring people food because there's this weird gap that people are falling into that can't get food. So she's not starving or anything. She's fine, but but I'm glad I'm here to be able to provide that service to her. But if anybody knows of any social service agency, organization or an agency that can bring prepared meals to people who are willing to pay for them like once a week, so she can have 2 or 3 meals that are just ready to go and throw in the oven, that'd be great.
That's something that I'll bring up with Susanna. Unfortunately, she's not able to join us tonight, because that's something that Bob, maybe we should be putting together a better list that's targeted specifically towards seniors, because I think as we move on, this is going to become a larger and larger issue, particularly as, if there are changes coming up anytime soon. Many of us may feel comfortable, going about activities, but for people who are in a more vulnerable state for whatever, or more risk factors, that's not going to change for them anytime soon. So I think that that's something we should maybe have a better grasp on for our community, and maybe reach out to Brad and Deborah and our local electeds in Corey's office, and Margaret, especially Margaret's office, actually, because she heads the senior task force. So, and
again, it's not a financial thing. She's,
right.
Very
oh yeah, we understand.
She's ready, willing, and able to give a donation to like whatever, $25, $50 a week. But there's just isn't. We're looking all over the place for some place that can bring her food that isn't like, of course you can go to a local restaurant and get Chinese, but it's not the same thing as having just, the kind of meals that city Meals on Wheels and all that stuff. But for people who can afford to actually pay these folks to do it, you can't seem to find that. So,
Bob, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to?
I do. Not about this one. I just wanted to remind all the chairs to make your best effort to get your reports in, if you have resolutions, as early as you can. With the staff working from home, in order to put together, it might be a little more complicated for them to put together the compilation of all the reports with the resos in advance of the full board meeting. So I think the worst thing would be if we got a report at 3 o'clock the day of the full board. That would really complicate things. So if you can get them in, preferably the day before, I think that would be fine. But the earlier the better. So that's it.
Okay, and Janine?
I just wanted to find out if anyone else has solicited input during a public meeting yet on this board. I mean, I like the Google Doc idea. Mm-hmm. Or has anyone actually had people talking, or has it just been through the Google Doc that you've heard about, or questions in advance? What are the other options for soliciting live public input?
When that Google Doc was filled out, the chair then actually went through the list and called on people. So each person then was put on and spoke.
Got it. But it was a Zoom call where and then the chair clicked on that person to allow them to speak.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And we also have the Q&A function, which we've used, but panelists can't participate in the Q&A. And so it's only for the public if you use that function, meaning attendees in Zoom webinar speak. But the host can move up and move down people to speak from attendees, so you can move them up. It's fairly easy. I think we're going to see how well this works in the committee level. And, I had thought about running the meetings in the committee level as just Zoom meetings, but it really, I was advised that keeping it as the webinar is really limits the potential for disruption. And that's really I think the main issue until we were more comfortable with that. I mean, we don't know how long we'll be meeting in this format. We're really dependent on the governor to continue doing that through his executive order. So this is something that could last for a while, or it may not. So, that's, I assume it's going on for at least another month, but, it could go on for some time after that. But there's a couple of different ways of doing that. But I think we can do it just like we have our normal meetings and people raising their hands. And if people have submitted something in writing, before, we should also give them an opportunity just to summarize what they have to say as well. Janine, you still have your hand up, or did I?
Oh, no, that you answered my question. I need
Okay.
to drop my hand.
Valerie?
Hey, I was gonna say, from a open, I went to like an open beta or beta NYC training, and I noticed it was effective when there were 2 people. It's kind of a lot. I mean, for you, Carter, you've done this for what, like a month already. Like this is second hand for you. But if it's I think it would be helpful if there was kind of like 2, like the
Right.
committee chair kind of has like a sidekick to kind of either like they are in charge of like managing the question queue or the switching screen type of thing to it. Anyways, it just seemed to go really smooth. Not an exactly apples to apples comparison, but that's just my experience.
Yeah, and that's very much how you've worked with me on this, is just just a point of just having somebody keep track. If you utilize the chat, having somebody keep track of what's going on there. And you also have the Q&A, which is another area where people can be commenting on things. And but yes, exactly. I was going to suggest, like I was just checking here, Valerie, I just made you a co-host, and Bob, I made you a co-host. So you can have a number of co-hosts, it looks like. And so I was going to say, after we finish this meeting, if any of the committee chairs wants to stay on, we can go through some of the features if people are interested in that, just so people can have a better understanding of how this works. And we could do it at some other point, during the week as well. So, and going back to the agendas, I just as far as the schedules are concerned, I know Shirley, you're with us, right? Just go down.
Oh, that's me.
Shirley?
She's there, but without video, I think.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
And
I would like to make a few comments. Is this the time to do it?
Sure.
For my agenda.
Shirley, I have one of the tablets that I was trying to figure out a little earlier today. I will figure it out so we can get that to you so you can have video.
Yeah, I actually think I ordered a microphone and camera to go on my computer. Happily, it will be here, we hope, in time for my meeting. So then maybe I can get clicking. But I'd like to just talk about the agenda and item number 3, which is a general item. And if you recall from last time, I mentioned to the gang, discussion concerning provision of safe pedestrian space in New York City during the coronavirus pandemic. And basically what we were really referring to is this whole impetus for open streets, which I don't know if all of you are aware. I know Carter is, I know Janet is, that the city council is actually taking the whole item up on Wednesday, and they are very much favoring putting in 75 miles of open streets, but they have not specified anything, and I don't know whether they're going to. I spoke with Pat Cummer today about that, and she was unsure of exactly what streets they might have in mind, and she very, very emphatically said that if we do a resolution, we should integrate suggestions for different possible streets, which brings me to what I was discussing with Carter, which is that I feel very strongly about being transparent about it in some way. Ordinarily, we would list a bunch of streets in the agenda, but I don't think that's the way it's going to come out. However, I think we need to send the community, at least block associations and perhaps other membership associations in the community, an email to just ask them to submit ideas on what streets they might like to have as open streets. And that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I think the criteria is there can't be bus routes on the streets. That's number one. there's a couple other that Pat had suggested. Some of the obvious.
Yeah, she did. Well, emergency.
Yeah, where anything around where the
things
fire
near
department-
hospitals, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what Shirley and I had been talking about is, you know, having some description that says any neighborhood street that's not a major through street, you know, should be up for consideration, and the more the better. And, you know, and a part of that is because we don't necessarily want to become a destination, but people are very, you know, as soon as it's not a destination, there's a lot of support for it. If it's bringing people in to the neighborhood as a place to go, it seems to diminish in the people I've talked to because of the concerns of a lot of people moving through the area. And I think that some of the different groups of suggestions that they made of just coning off the neighborhood streets of which there's not a need to transit through the city on, and have them maintained, you know, just by very basic road closed type of signs or local deliveries only or whatever it may be, is, you know, makes a lot of sense. There's not much traffic on those roads to begin with, and having pedestrians as the primary user and the cars have to look out for the pedestrians as opposed to the other way around seems to make more sense. The mayor this morning, when he was asked a question by one of the reporters during his news conference, and had a few comments which he's made before. He talks a lot about that it doesn't really fit the reality of New York, and that he said that he hadn't seen a plan that works for New York. But I don't think that that's true. I think it's easy to put forward, you know, just these smaller streets, you know, they're, you know, it's fairly self-evident if you make it less complicated and have more neighborhood streets closed than the other way around. And I don't think you need a police presence, and I think the security issues sort of, you know, fall away with that. I mean, I've spent a lot of time asking for people, because I think if we have a resolution, I'd like to see this to be unanimous or as close to unanimous as possible, so we can really send a strong message. And I don't think it would preclude, you know, vehicles from making deliveries on those streets or other things like that. And so I just...
No, because we're talking about shared streets, actually. I think that's what the major thrust is, which means that there will be possibilities for entry onto those streets for like a delivery or an emergency or that kind of thing. I don't think that they're even talking about totally pedestrianized streets, except maybe on Broadway or larger streets. That's my impression. I would just like to say that I think that it's up for grabs in the committee. This is for a committee discussion and consideration, and so we really need some suggestions from people, and whether they be for neighborhood streets or for larger streets, which can then be discussed in the Traffic and Transportation Committee where it belongs. We're kind of up in the air. Yeah, we can say, hey, neighborhood streets, but
right.
we are asked to give at least specific examples. I know Community Board 4 gave very specific examples. I'm going to check with her as to what kind of criteria she used for those particular streets. So that may help, but I still think we've got to have some community input on this and some. And
well,
it seems to me they're not necessarily going to attend the meeting, but we can, and that would be great if they can and give their input that way, and we invite them to do that, obviously. But we do need some other way. And to me, it would seem, at least if we ask them to send in their suggestions and give them enough time, we got something to chew on.
Yeah, if you look at a map, I was looking at the map of the community board earlier and all the streets, and it's sort of, once you start looking at the traffic movements in what really is a neighborhood street that isn't a thorough connect through to somewhere else, becomes pretty apparent where you can see it really come alive of what areas make sense to close down. And then it's a question of any local knowledge specific to, you know, are there any active construction sites in that immediate vicinity? Are there any other activities going on? I mean, it's not that complicated when you start looking.
I'm talking about transparency, that's all. And to make sure that people have been invited to give suggestions. And also, the other part is that they have to be willing to take part in perhaps very simple activities, but still willing to take part in whatever the management of that particular street or those particular streets would be. That's all I'm talking about, transparency. Another board was accused of not having transparency because they made a proposal. And I think it's important for us to get out there to the community and to let them know that this will be discussed in traffic and transportation. And whatever the streets are and whatever are logical streets, we need that community input.
Yeah, and
I'm
if
not
I
saying
might-
which street. Sorry, Janet, go ahead.
Just to add to that from the the Economic Development Small Business Committee, I know our bids have opinions, so I think it's important to hear from them because they do have the capacity to manage streets and take care of things, so that they could be an important partner.
So, Bob, is that possible to narrow
Shirley,
down a list?
Well,
Yeah.
Shirley, I think the idea is that almost all the community groups are on our mailing list. So when we'll just send out a specific email that's specifically targeted to this meeting and say, the idea is to communicate the spirit of what we want to discuss without necessarily listing specific streets. And that's what I was bringing up, is that when you start saying the neighborhood streets consideration for closing, suddenly, people are going to be like, yeah, that sounds good. I don't want cars driving up on me when I'm walking down my own street. And that's, I think people are already walking in those streets. It's just, they have to do so in a much more careful manner. I mean, there's really not, outside of the avenues and some of the couple of main crosstown streets, there's not that much traffic. That's
right. Oh no, I agree with all of it. All I'm saying is, if we can get out a query, that's fine, because then we've covered ourselves, and maybe we'll get some really great ideas.
Yeah, and so that's next Monday, and so we'll probably, maybe tomorrow we can send out a specific email for that meeting in particular. Bob had asked Robin and Rich for your joint meeting. Is that still, everything's all good on that?
Yep, go ahead, Rob. You could say.
Yeah, I was just going to say they're very well. Did you hear back from the applicant that he's presenting, right?
Oh yeah, so we have two things. We have the Little Island, or the Diller Island, or Pier 55, whatever you want to call it. That's one. And then we have the Pier 45 outdoor cafe concession.
Right, and then also the Whitney's Days End.
Oh, that's of course, yes.
So,
and,
yeah, and the two, I don't know about the vendor, but the Little Island and Whitney are very enthusiastic about talking about what we were going to talk about last month, and I think just to connect about everything else. So I think I'm glad that we waited, but I think the timing is right to now start up.
Okay. So yeah, I do think that's going to be a case where people who join in are going to want to ask questions that they wouldn't be able to have posed at 5 o'clock the night before, because they'll see things in the design, and they'll see things in the that they'll hear about the programming, and they may want to pose questions in a more interactive way.
I know Susan isn't able to, Wittenberg wasn't able to join us tonight, but she had said something over to us today. We may have to be talking a little bit more about parks and how they're being used as well by that time, as the weather gets nicer. And this is sort of ties in with the streets, and just what happens as the weather starts to get warmer. And
you mean on the 6th that we should add that to as an agenda item?
Well, I think it's a
good point. But
that we should be anticipating things, just like I had said about, the education committee having a placeholder meeting, and suddenly, boom, you guys have a lot of topics to talk about. And so, we just have to, I think.
No, but I think it's a good point. Should we be preemptively thinking of somebody to talk on the topic?
Well, I'm saying I don't think we should advocate for anything except that they start closing things, and if whether or not we don't like that, but I don't think we should put it on there
No.
I just want to make sure
I'll see it.
that's what you're asking. Okay.
I'm just saying it's a responsive.
We'll be ready, but
Proactive.
I agree.
You know, and this also goes, Shirley, for traffic and transportation. You know, if we want to be commenting on any of the issues in the subway, you know, for any of our local subway stations, because apparently, I don't know if you read in the city this morning that there's been some increased crime in the subways, and
Yes.
you know, the problem is that when you slow down the trains, there's nobody going through the subways
Exactly.
they used to, and you know, if that's something that's a problem in our community, I mean, so few people are out that when they say that crimes are down from last year, it's a misnomer. That there shouldn't be any crime, and so nobody's really willing to discuss this in a transparent fashion of what's going on, and I just, you know, want to, I don't know, these are our subway stations in our community, and so if there are any issues there, if that's something we want to comment on or not. I mean, a lot of it is because not enough trains are moving through there, so there's no eyes on the subway stations. You know, that's
right. Well, there's no critical mass.
Right. So
going back to the park thing just for a second, I was out, you know, in Hudson River Park on Saturday, and you know, it wasn't even ideal. It was a little chilly, but it was packed. I mean, I felt like I was on the Long Island Expressway going out to the Hamptons on a Friday. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like in a month when it's 70 on a Saturday.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody was kind of being thankfully thoughtful to some extent, but there was also some, you know, people who were aggressive bike riders, you know, because I was a little bit like that too. You want to pass people who are going slow, so you go in the lane that's opposite from you. So I'm concerned that there might be some accidents actually caused by the volume of people in the next couple of weeks or months.
I think it's true. I was on Sunday.
Bottom line, people need somewhere to go.
Yeah.
I mean, unless there's a ban that you can't leave your apartment, people need somewhere to go, and you can't close you either need to open up more space or the opposite and ban people and force them to stay inside, which I don't think is healthy.
Well, it's just the bike route on the Hudson River is very popular, but it's very narrow, and the volume of people I think now that are using it is probably more excessive than in the past. So there needs to be, I wonder if there needs to be like, I mean, there's National Guard people sort of at different points, but they're not doing traffic control, but I'm wondering if there might need to be some sort of, I don't know, traffic lights or something because it's a little bit of a free-for-all. It's on the verge. Nothing's happened yet.
Well, that's why we need more open streets. So
that's why the transportation meeting is so important.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, what Carter referred to, Susan said she walked through Washington Square Park and it was jam-packed with people that weren't adhering to social distancing and among other issues. And I think it's just going to get worse as the weather gets better.
But that's where I had mentioned it, I think, a couple of weeks ago, is Washington Square Park has large swaths of it that are just grass that are being reseeded, but it's like we're in a public health crisis. So I think that those areas should be open for people to use rather than be all scrunched together.
Well, they're just people are just going on it without, they're just getting around, especially the dog parks are closed. So people are using the grass with their dogs.
I know, and there should be, the part that was newly reseeded in the northwest corner should be opened up, I think.
It's kind of hard right now to talk to our people like the police and the Parks Department and ask that they jump at our requests. They're sort of focused on some other things.
Oh, for sure. Just like the Department of Transportation we're going to them with requests to open up streets. Why is that? Those are pretty analogous.
Well, you could go to the Conservancy. The Conservancy is very specifically concerned just with the park. I mean.
Yeah, and they're sort of fed up with it too. In fact, George, I should have announced George is quitting or retiring.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think there's a general, those guys don't get a lot of appreciation. I think, we're at a part in the time in the city now when there's going to have to be some difficult choices on where resources are spent and who's going to be involved in things. This is a beginning of what's going to be a much different environment, running at 20%, of the budget. And so I I think we should be, as an organization, we should be prioritizing the concerns that we have and trying to get our elected officials to deal with them. Yeah, for lack of a better term. I mean, there's, I'll report it and, to the police, and they'll say they'll do the best they can, but they've got X% of the staff out, and they'll do it as best they can. We do have parks officers that are in there. Today they were fighting against kids on skateboards. So there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, and the other unspoken thing is, I mean, the budget discussions are starting in the city council, but there's going to be some pretty massive, impacts on the services that we see as a community, sort of direct things. And, parks, an example, are one of those. I know the corner you're talking about, Joe, I mean, they've struggled for years because of the drainage issues over there.
That's true.
To keep it not being just sort of a dirt field. And I think they finally got somewhere. I think George had mentioned, was it a couple of years ago, Rich? So they got that drainage sorted out. And so they've just been struggling to get the grass growing over there so it matches the other parts of the park. But you're right. I mean, that's a struggle. If they're going to be cutting things, do you just let it go? And then that's it. And they're not going to have the budget back to deal with that in the future. Or is that something that you let it, get a foothold in there for the next 2 months and then, go from there? I'm not a expert at all, but those are the challenges that we're going to be facing. I mean, the Conservancy hopefully is going to be there to pick up a lot of those issues, right, from the city side. I mean, those are very real issues, though, going forward. I mean, some of the conversations about the education budget have been really kind of astounding when you listen to what we need to get from the federal government, and they don't seem to be very interested in supporting the schools. I mean, it's 50%, I think, budget cut is what, without federal funding, I think is what I heard. It's pretty staggering. Janine, did I see you have your?
Yes, I'm sorry to circle back to transportation, but I want to know if the discussion on the street closures will also include the staffing. That it's not that the sort of
definitely.
Okay, that you don't need a ton of policemen on every block to make this happen.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and what the alternatives could be, including local folks if they're willing, which is one of the reasons I want to do some outreach on that.
It's got to be.
Yeah, and moving to neighborhood streets as opposed to the primary streets really allows there not to be police there, because there's not somebody who says, I always go this way, I'm just going to drive through. That becomes less and less of an issue when you look at neighborhood streets as opposed to Park Avenue South, where there was not a comfort level by the mayor to not have police on every corner, which debatable, of course, but that's seems to be his viewpoint. Katie, I see that you have your hand up. Do you want me to unmute you, Katie? Oops, I just lost you. There you are. I'm going to unmute you. Katie? You there, Katie? All right, I don't see Katie.
She doesn't have her hand up, though.
Oh, I just lowered it, that's why. Amy?
Oh.
Yeah, hi. This is not directly related to traffic and transportation, but I know you're talking about federal funding, and I did send you an email about this. So our census response rate, CB2, is incredibly low right now.
No.
I sent you all that map, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but I'm wondering where would be an appropriate place to have a conversation about, and would be very happy to get involved with this. We're doing a lot of census stuff at the nonprofit where I work. How do we start getting, thinking about getting people filling out the census? Because we were in the 20% range.
Yeah, Bob and I were talking about this earlier. Number one, we're going to reach out and ask Julie to come speak at our full board meeting. And number two, do a separate email maybe. What's the deadline for submitting? Is that?
No, well, it's been extended now. It's October 31st. It's been extended to, but that's good and that's bad because then you don't have that urgency of a timeline. You've got to get it done now.
I was just asking because I think that we might start sending out a separate email for the census, but I don't want it to be too often that it overwhelms our other emails, that people start just ignoring it, but at the same time bring sort of singular attention to that issue. Yeah. In a large part, a lot of this is reaching out to your neighbors, right? And getting them and asking them if they filled it out and impressing upon them how important it is. Because that's the one-on-one's really what's key, I think. I've mentioned it to a few people and they haven't really understood the importance of the census.
Well, I'm wondering if we should put together a temporary small committee to come up with ways to get the word out, provide tools. I forget the name of the thing, Gail Brewer, you can do these special groups. But it seems to me, looking at other response rates in our area, Stuyvesant Town has a killer response rate. I'm not quite sure why. But I think if we really want to get our response rates up, we should be partnering with other communities, maybe the BIDs to, have tabling or training sessions if people want to, be captains for their apartment building or something, because I don't think emails alone is going to do it.
Yeah.
Do you know what other community boards are doing, Amy?
I do not know what they're doing, but I'd be happy to take that on and look at it if you'd like me to. But I do know based on, we've given grants and we're working with people in 20 different communities in New York City. And I hear what's working for them. And it's definitely, like Carter said, person to person outreach, but it can be through groups that people are associated with. But they need the tools, and it's not that hard to create the tools. We've created tons of tools that can be adjusted for our community. But it's gonna be more than emails.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk to me later about it or however you want to handle it, we have time. We have till October 31st when the last census gets in. But I would really urge us to get involved.
Yeah. If you can find out any more information on what some other activities people are doing, and what groups we can reach out to, I think that'd be helpful. In many respects, we're limited to some extent, but we have a lot of connections to other partners who can keep sharing that message locally. And it's the biggest thing is everybody. First of all, Gail has said she's going to call the community board chairs and make sure that we've reached out to all the community board members to make sure that they've filled out their census forms, just impressing upon how important it is, and that everybody on the board reach out to others and share the same thing. That's really the most effective way to make that happen, but is just keep impressing to people how important it is. That's sort of old school canvassing.
Yeah, I'll look into what other community boards are doing, because I know some of them do have special committees put up, and I'll get back to you about that.
Okay, thanks. Michael?
Sure.
Yes, one thing I wanted to mention, Julie, when she spoke to us several months ago during the public session of our board meeting when we were at the Scholastic Center, said one of the best things we can do is to contact her office for a special package and get it out to every community organization that we know of in our community. So Julie said there are packages that can be sent out if we have a contact in every community organization, and it's very, very explicit about how to reach further into the community. I don't know if we had all of our board members present when she spoke during the public session, but again, she said that if you contact her office, they already have packages ready to send out to every community organization that we can think of and have a contact on our own to fan out into the community. And I think that would be worth looking into. If we can check with her office, Bob, and find out what's available, perhaps we can all distribute it to every organization we individually belong to.
We work with Julie Menon's office all the time. I'm happy to reach out to her and get that.
Great. Great. I just don't know how many people heard her make that offer when she spoke during our executive session several months ago.
It's part of those smaller groups that people, and I'm just blanking on the name of it.
Yeah, I've seen that they have different forms that are targeted, whether it be building supers, building managers, to residents. I mean, they have very targeted packages, you know, that they can send us. That would be very helpful, Amy. Actually, Amy, if you want to, you know, you, Bob, and I can talk at some point in the coming days about maybe figuring out an effective strategy of just being consistent over the next couple of months to make sure this is at the forefront without it being overbearing, but just really getting in front of people and maybe some simple things that we can start including in all of our mailings that maybe are a little different each time, but, you know, informative. I think people are also confused as whether or not you need the card with the number on it to fill this out, or if you can just go fill it out without that if somebody's away or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I'll touch base with you, and before I contact the people at Julie's office, and maybe we can talk this week or next week, whatever works for you all.
Okay, sounds good. Janine?
I'm sorry, with another. I got a couple questions via text. People were wondering, so the DOE is distributing meals, and in Community Board 2, it's still distributing at PS 41 and PS 130. And PS 130 on Friday, I think, distributed 4,772 meals to people coming in to get free meals, which gives you, this gets to the food insecurity issue that Carter was talking about at the beginning of the call. And these are just, you don't have to be a student. Monday through Friday, anyone can show up. Adults can go from 11:30 to 1:30, and families and children from 7:30 to 11:30.
I think what Robin was saying was that they need food delivery to the homes of seniors.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a separate problem. People were wondering who's delivering all these, who's receiving all these meals, and these are people who are capable. At least one family member goes and picks up these meals, and they're not great, but it's you know, it's better than
God's Love We Deliver, which is in CB2, it does deliveries, and I don't know the criteria for that, but I think they deliver to anybody who wants a meal. I think.
But Janine, that was one day, 4,700 in one day.
Yes, just on Friday.
Gosh, that's astounding.
Yeah.
And normally it's 1,000 for the kids in the school.
Yeah.
That's, so I see what
It
Katie.
is an astounding number, I must say.
I see what Katie. I was just looking over the chat just to Valerie's point that it's hard to look in all the different areas. And Katie, who said she could hear me, but I guess we couldn't hear her. She said this was in respect to Hudson River Park. It's not the number of people in Hudson River Park, but the fact that they are not wearing masks. So that's another point. You know, it's kind of very unclear right now. You know, the guidance is you're supposed to wear a mask outside if you're not able to social distance. But, you know, when you walk by somebody and they're not wearing a mask, you know, people start to get very uncomfortable when they are, and you know, it's a question of you know, how does everybody interact when somebody else is making you uncomfortable? And that just goes straight into the streets issue, you know, where a little bit more room, particularly on the local streets, would make a big difference. Is there do any other committee chairs have anything that they'd like to raise? Donna or Bob, anything? No? All right.
Ours is going to be, Carter, ours is going to be quite good, I think, because we only have 4 things on the agenda, one of which is complicated. So it would be a good sort of breaking in of whatever methodologies we use.
Okay. You know, before we finish I was just, the question sheets that Janet had brought up, you know, the other issue that sort of ties into, I was just flipping through my notes here, was, is the sign-in sheets. And that's something, Valerie, you know, you had brought up when you were doing the minutes for some of the meetings. And, you know, the people registering, and, you know, we can do the sign-in sheets. The issue is that when you have sort of an unsecured document there, anybody can write anything they want in there. And once you get into a meeting where you've had issues with that, you know, you kind of realize that, you know, can you be trusting of everybody who's participating? And so that's a bit of a challenge, I think. And it's something that this week, through each of the committee meetings with the committee chairs, as far as figuring out, you know, air quotes, taking attendance. Most people who sign in or register for the meeting, we do have that information on who's registered with their names and emails and any other information that they've volunteered. So maybe that's something, Valerie, that I'll start sharing with you in the committee chairs, just to get a sense of, but just because somebody registers doesn't mean that they necessarily participate in the meeting.
Yeah, or that they actually attended.
Right.
Who hasn't signed up for a Zoom and then not attended?
Wait, you have? No, sorry.
No, no, of course not at all. But another alternative, this all goes from this Beta NYC training that I did on Friday. They had people, as they were getting things arranged, they just had people in the chat, just sign in, in the chat. But then people would have to have access to the chat, or at least the panelists be able to see the chat. But that was the only alternative I've seen besides the Google Doc.
Okay. On the other thing that Bob and I were going to explore with Hannah from I can't remember the name of the company who's going to do the board training, is whether she'd be interested in doing it over Zoom. We're going to reach out to her, and I actually thought that this might be a really good format in which to do those trainings, because there's an ability to go into breakout rooms, et cetera, and that might actually work pretty well. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Is it good, bad, neutral?
And it has the virtue of it can be recorded.
Yes, exactly.
In an orderly way.
Yeah, we're going to reach out to her and see if that's something that she's comfortable doing, or if you know, we would need to break it down into smaller groups if over a certain number of people becomes unwieldy for the manner in which she does the trainings. And I think that's I think that, you know, one of the other things that I wanted to bring up, and I've been asking people, and sort of, you know, well, everybody's in the same boat is the answer that I hear from a lot of people. I'm really concerned about sort of small businesses and in our community. And I don't know what we as a community board can do per se to support small businesses. And I was going to reach out to some of the small business owners on our board, but, you know, if there's anything specific, even if it's somehow even having business owners speak so that the public can hear what the concerns are in our community, because I think that would help people understand just how important this is for us here in our community, because we rely on so many visitors that come into our community to support our local businesses that may not be coming right away. You know, is there anything, you know, are there any ideas? You know, when I've talked to people, some people have said, well, that's just the way it is. You know, everybody's in the same boat. We'll have to see. But I you know, I'm just very concerned that we're going to have a different streetscape. Gail had threw out some numbers that were pretty astounding today in Borough Board on what she had heard as far as the, she went from 1/3 to 50% of our small businesses maybe not coming back. A lot of the nonprofits and cultural institutions, a very significant number, 1/3, or 1/4 or 1/3 not coming back. Those are pretty staggering numbers. And so, it's something I see. Dan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as a small business owner and, working with Janet on, our committee, it's important that we give our business community, small business community, hope and information. And I think that if you give up hope, you're going to close down. But if we can continue to give information and let everyone know that things are still in process and that it's not a dead-end street, I think that's how we save businesses. And as long as we keep the information flowing and show that the system, even though it is a little rigged, and we can get into that later, but is not completely rigged, that everyone can have hope. And I think that I agree with you. I think that as a small business owner who has suffered a lot of anxiety, had to make a lot of decisions, but when I get information, it gives me hope. And I'd like to share that. And I think as a community, we can continue to share that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard is a lot of people have just heard silence, crickets, in this process. And I think that you're right, Dan, on that. And Robin?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Dan said, I'm not a small business owner, but I feel like I can get the anxiety in a sense. I think sharing the information, but also from a psychological standpoint, just showing that we're listening and available. And, we talked about this a little earlier. I think if we do these meetings, I think there needs to be a little bit of a structure, maybe, try to have a certain agenda, which may go off the rails a little bit, but to start off with some topics that would be of interest. Maybe we do a Google survey in advance to figure out the top 3 or 4 things that would be discussed. And then you never know, you have some new eyes on things and, new ideas might pop up. We live in one of the greatest cities, if not the greatest city in the world, with the top people, and there's assets here, and there's just a new way of looking at things that I think new eyes can help. It's not going to be it's not going to save everything, but it might be able to provide a little extra support to the moment, a little reinvention perhaps. So I'm with Dan. I just think there needs to be a little structure to it.
Yeah, and Robin and I forgot to mention, Robin and I were discussing that because the speaker's office had reached out to us to put together a call of all the theater owners in our community board to have an opportunity to hear out some of their specific concerns right now, early on, so that if possible, people can start, obviously money is going to be a complicated one, but if there are other ideas that can go forward to specifically address the theaters in our community. Theaters are the reason people come here in many respects. Then they go and spend money at going out to dinner and doing other things. So they're an important and often overlooked or underappreciated aspect of what's specific in our community board. Matt, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was, Phil, it's your meeting, so you get to do this, but you stole my idea, and I can prove it because I have notes written out already, which was, it's not my meeting, and I always hate speaking at anything that isn't my meeting, so take that as a measure of my running around with my hair on fire. I'm taking off the EMT hat and putting on the banker hat and saying that there are barbarians at literally every gate, and the federal government has done a lot. Obviously not nearly enough, but on a couple fronts, a lot to plug some of the holes. But anecdotally, completely anecdotally, I'm finding small business owners have no idea about the resources that are available to them. And those are not going to be the people who we capture on a Google Docs survey. And it's, not going to be the people who sign up for our meetings. And how do we capture that? Because I don't know if everybody else is, looking at or hearing the same stuff. It is for small businesses, literally between firing everybody and not. So that was my uplifting message of the day.
Thanks, Matt. Michael.
It might be useful for us to bring together representatives, the executive director or the president of each of our bids, to ask them how they are approaching small businesses. I know from the Village Alliance, on which several of us sit, there is, as Matt is saying, great ignorance on the part of the small business owners as to what's available, how to apply for it, and how it might help. So we as a community board might want to bring our bid representatives, just one person from each bid, together in one meeting, something like this, and ask them what recommendations they have that we might be able to help to reach the small business owners in our community. They may be doing things as individual bids that we don't know about and that we may want to do on a wider basis, and that may help some of our small businesses in the community.
Michael, do you mind me speaking? We've done that in the past, and the bids have been very helpful. This is Daniel. And I agree with you, and they've been very great participants in every single one of our meetings thus far. Tomorrow's is not going to be as interactive, but I agree that Janet and I also agree that having the bids as active members of information is crucial to our getting the word out.
And we also need to, you know, we talk about silos. You know, you've got all these committees doing different things, and one of the things that's important to all these, you know, we come back to open streets. People aren't going to come back out if there's no room for them to be out. So I discussed with Shirley, you know, or this is just in the early stages, but there could be some cross meetings with transportation and with small business and maybe with quality of life to discuss, you know, maybe what we can do. You know, obviously all our festivals are canceled, which, you know, good and bad. Most of us probably are fine about that. But, you know, there are open street events that would, you know, I mean, we're not going to just, there's not going to be a switch turned on, and we're not going to have no social distancing 6 months from now. I mean, it's going to be a very long, slow process. So, you know, maybe there are events that could draw people to Bleecker Street, and, you know, we should be kind of talking across committees about some of these things.
And Michael, to your point, you know, we've been trying to publish any of the bids when they've done any of their activities, because most of them are very open to other businesses participating. They just may not do one-on-one help with them like they would for their members, but the information at those meetings is very helpful. The NoHo bid and the Soho Broadway Initiative did a call just last week, which I thought was very informative. They brought in, this is an attorney, an accountant, and some other people, and really got into another level of detail that I had not heard yet, because they were not speaking as a program sponsor, but as people who were using the programs. And so, you know, they got down to some questions with some more specifics that I don't think that a program sponsor would have answered in quite the same way. So that was interesting. And I think that's something, you know, I was going to talk to Janet and Dan about. It's like unifying the bids, that if they're going to do these discussions and bring people in, that maybe we all can co-sponsor it together, so that the reach is broader, so that people can at least get a chance to participate. It's interesting. There have been a few restaurant owners that I've seen pop up on these meetings that aren't in any bids, and I've gotten some direct text messages. What's a bid? Who are they? What's going on? I don't know this. How can I get help? And the resources on those web pages are pretty good. And you know, so that's why we have them all listed on our links page, because that's a great place for localized information. Chenault, I see you're.
I've had several discussions with theater and dance people, and in one case, cabaret. The fear is that this is the very last thing to come back, because however it's organized for the performance itself and the people, how soon is somebody want to come back and sit as close to somebody as one does in any theater. And the Shakespeare canceled the Park, which is probably the safest regular theater kind of place in New York, because of that. So just particular concern.
Yeah. Hey, does anybody have any other comments, questions? Is there any other new business? Okay, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, but I am going to stay on if any of the committee chairs want to stay on just to see what the tools are, what it looks like if you're a co-host for a meeting.
Great, thanks, Carter.
It's a few other times.
Thanks, Carter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Carter, I've got an 8 o'clock Zoom. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just, I'll let everybody who wants to jump off and
could we have a time to talk about the landmarks, Carter?
Yes.
Sometime. You want to do it now or tomorrow?
We can. Well, we'll see who sticks around, and we can.
Okay.
I see some people dropping off and some people staying, so it's.
Yeah, my bandwidth's a little narrow right now. I mean, I want to talk to you about, since Rich and I are you. I just want to make sure we're coordinated ahead of May 6th.
Sure.
I mean, we have time.
Yeah, I can cover. Rob, if you need to go, I can cover.
No, I can stay. I just, I wasn't sure how much we needed to talk about how we're going to handle the 6th. But.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if I could, I'd like to send you. I've written out some things about.
Okay, sure.
You and I can be together, and then maybe tomorrow. I'm free anytime in the day tomorrow.
Okay. So I guess what I'm gonna right now. Valerie is a co-host, and I'm going to. I guess withdraw co-host permission. It's very
Sounds rough.
The power.
But we need a mixture